Okay, this is part 2, and I want to talk about the actual causality of crime and whatever people do. Weird neurosis and mental illness in general. But in particular, the question, why are people criminal? Why do people do criminal acts? Why do people hurt other living beings? Okay, so that is the question that I have pursued for most of my life. And I've been extremely interested in this. Also, I'm interested in parapsychology. I've been interested in that since age 11 because that's when I discovered my dad's library on parapsychology, or so-called psi books, his psi book library that he had over his bed. So a shelf, very wide and large shelf, all the way to the ceiling with parapsychology. And this has fascinated me and also scared me, but I knew this was true because I have already experienced very weird things as a child. All kinds of things. I saw a skull and bone, like a skull with two crossed bones, literally, like that symbol of piracy or something. I saw a skull with two like arm bones crossed under the skull at in front of my feet at the foot end of my bed when I was like 4 years old. So, but that was just one moment that I saw it. The next moment it was gone. So, and I had all kinds of fears. I thought there were men's shoes protruding from under the curtain. The curtain looked kind of like men's slacks that they wore in the 60s. Those kind of things, like non-stop this was going on. I was afraid of ghosts before I even knew about something like this. And my dad said there are no ghosts. He would always kind of like make fun of me about this, but I knew they exist. I just felt it intuitively. And there were a bunch of entities actually when I was already a child that were trying to get my attention, that were trying real hard to make me look at them and see. But I was just a little child. How can I wasn't ready yet for any kind of communication with those entities. So there's no way I could help them. But they saw me, they recognized me as a soul myself. We have a ghost inside of us, so that is our soul. And I guess they wanted me to help them, but when I'm a little child, there's no way I can help them. I'm just terrified and confused, and I don't know how to deal with that. So the way I dealt with it is by painting all of that out on paper with pens and markers, and also I crafted stuff with patching papers on top of papers and making masks and different things. So Ghosts that was a huge theme in my artwork. Constantly painting ghosts from age 2 all the way to today, basically. So there's another artwork over that door that Paul recently installed there. That I made that artwork that is acrylic on wood. It's very, very beautiful. And this is becoming more and more cluttered with my artwork and plastered and very nice. I like that. I like that a lot. And over the window also, I like that a lot. Love it. And I'm almost finished with this one that will go in between those two lamp posts. So it's gonna be real nice. I love it. And then I already have new projects that I'm going to be making. So that's all I can do. I can make artwork out of packaging materials because I can't afford other stuff. But like I said in my video outside, if I had money, I would make very, very large semi-truck size sculptures, and I would place them in different gardens, and including our own garden. We're gonna have a future garden that's gonna be very large, so it's gonna be awesome. We want to get a very large greenhouse and maybe put a sculpture in that greenhouse also. And I want to live in the greenhouse. So that is, I view greenhouses as the future of architecture. So that is just an inevitable movement to get away from very, very rough weather patterns that are emerging every single day. And people can't be in denial about it anymore because it's happening, obviously. So people's roofs are literally blown off above them. And storms where there used to be no storms. And so this is real. Global warming is real. Climate catastrophe is real. Okay, it's caused by atmospheric warming. And yeah, these fluctuations have occurred also in the past. I wonder if they occurred naturally though. Sometimes they may have because of whatever different things, but then again, who knows what the other predecessor root races of humanoids before us have done. So we don't know. Okay. No one knows that for 100% what happened there, but there's a lot of speculation on this now, and that speculation is backed up by scientific facts. So there are people that have drilled into mud at the Mariana Trench, at the deepest part of the ocean. And I think that's somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America. And parts where they thought they drilled deep into that mud, where they thought that there's no way that could have become contaminated yet from our root race, from our civilization. And what they found is very, very interesting, because very, very deep down they found different layers, okay, like sedimentation layers. And they found one sedimentation layer that contained something similar to microplastics and other type of things that are very artificial, that could not have evolved naturally or been created naturally. Chemicals and molecules that are not occurring in nature. So even some radioactive particles. So now that is fascinating beyond measure, and a lot of scientists will just bury their head in the sand and say that can't be. Okay, so, and that's denial, because they want to protect, they're too invested in the personality that they have developed, and they're too invested in the person, in the persona that they have developed, that believes these kind of things and nothing else. That becomes an identification, and when things become an identification and something else comes in that pulls out the rug from underneath them in terms of what is going on in reality or in the past, then they just go into a denial state. And this happens in scientists, this happened in my mother, she was a lawyer, and it can happen in anyone. It happens in physicians. It also happens it happens in many different science areas, physics, astrophysics. It can happen in regular people that are just baking bread every day, a baker. It can happen in whoever, a race car driver. I mean, anyone can be affected with denial of something, okay? So, and it's always denial when something that they encounter that questions the reality around them, that their identification of themselves had been attached to in some way. Like, for example, you take a Christian who believes in marriage should only be between a man and a woman. Then there are civil rights activists and feminists, and all of this buzz is going around them in the world, and they come to the conclusion, no, marriage should not only pertain to a man and a woman, okay? And there it pulls the rug out from under the Christian that has attached himself, he has attached his identification to this belief, and this goes so far that some of these Christians can become criminals in order to defend their identification with this particular belief of man and woman can only marry, or you need to heal a gay man from being gay, or those kind of things that are totally anti-scientific, because we have already established scientifically now that homosexuality, for example, happens in the embryonic development, okay? There could also be genetic components that play into it, but it has definitely been established already in 1989 that if the mother has stress during the embryonic development of gender, during that phase, which is the 3rd month of embryonic development, during the gestation phase of this new being, that when there is a disruptive element happening in the mother, when the mother has like particularly severe psychological stress or something like this, or is under a lot of pressure. Stress is literally the number one illness creating source, okay? Way worse than substance abuse and any of these other things. That is the truth, okay? So that is really the root cause of people becoming sick, is there is this the psychological component of psychological stress factors. Okay, and when that happens while a woman is pregnant, that's really, really bad. I mean, that can cause all kinds of disruption in her body and affecting her unborn developing being, okay, in the womb. So if that stress happens somewhere during the 3rd month of embryonic development, then all kinds of things can go wrong. I read the research papers already when they came out in Psychology Today. That was very interesting. And so I tried to explain this to people, but then again, people had already attached their identification with with another explanation, and they would not be open for the scientific find, obviously. But this is what science, really honest science, has found out. That is the case. So either way, don't make fun of anyone who is different in this or another way. Okay, it just they just are, and no, they're not crippled. This is just there happened to be a developmental stagnation in the gender development in this particular embryo, and the person growing up then turns out to be slightly deviated from the ideal. I'm not even call it norm. What is norm is norm what most people are, then the norm shifts according to different things that are happening in the environment that causes maybe the majority of people to turn out then that will become the norm. So is that the ideal? Norm is not always the ideal, obviously. So we got to become very crystal clear about this. So again, one subject following another subject, as always. Denial. Okay, that's humongous. That subject is so humongous that I've made many videos about this. Dr. Vilayana Ramachandran from University of San Diego, University of California in San Diego. He has done a lot of research on people with phantom limbs and had some major breakthroughs, scientific breakthroughs in just simple perception. He did perception tests with people, unbelievable, infinitely interesting. And he found this phenomenon of anosognosia, where a client with one limb, like one arm, that where maybe the neural connection had been severed to the brain, where they cannot move that arm anymore. And the client will go into a denial. And this denial is actually going so far into the biology that it is, you don't even know where the psychology ends and the biology begins with this. So it's a gradual deep state denial, that the deeper the denial, the more biological it becomes. Actually, then it becomes really a neurological problem rather than just kind of like a surface level psychological problem. But all of this ties in with one another, of course. You can't completely separate the two. But it's very interesting how deep the denial goes with those clients, where they know that they can't move the arm. They even have been, that's why they're there in the clinic to get treatment, but they will still go into denial and say, I just don't want to use that arm right now. My arm is, there's nothing wrong with my arm, I just don't want to use it right now. So this is a deep state denial called anosognosia, and where they lose touch of even knowing that there's anything wrong with their arm or with that neuronal connection that had been severed. So, and there are different types of severing, that different areas of severing, of course, but the fact is they can't use the arm, and then they go into a denial about it. And I find that absolutely fascinating. They have already seen this happening with deer, and that's called the wounded deer syndrome. When a deer is wounded and pretends to not be wounded, then that deer has a greater chance of not being caught by a predator. It's very interesting. So this type of denial has actually proven itself to be beneficial in survival. Thus, it persisted through the generations. Okay, that's what happened. Survival of the fittest, it is one form of fittest in terms of this type of anosognosia in the deer. So it's very, very interesting. They keep on grazing and act like nothing is wrong when they're actually limping, or they have been wounded, or maybe they broke one of their bones. They still act like nothing is going on, particularly when a predator is in sight. So now this denial type, that goes into all kinds of fields, into all kinds of areas. And as you can imagine, with a human being quite complex psychologically, denial can take on some wild, vast-reaching forms, okay? And denial in humans usually has to do, particularly in the field of psychology, with identification. And that's what Jiddu Krishnamurti and David Bohm talked about for over 50 years, is the pathology of identification with whatever, someone will identify themselves with having a high status, having some kind of high social status of some sort, like fame or a very high-ranking profession, like the star architect of the town or something like this. And then they will cling to this because it becomes an identification. If something happens and they can't practice architecture anymore for whatever reason, the identification is still there. The clinging to that is still there, and they try to compensate in some ways to keep this identification going. So this can go into any field. You can just name it. Any kind of identification with any profession or belief system or worldview or political view. And we see it now. This is a classic with the Democratic Party that had been completely destroyed by the mafia. Completely. They literally they turned it like a pocket inside out. Okay. So they turned good into bad and bad into good in it. They completely destroyed it from the inside out. Paul and I have voted Democrat long time ago, when it was still somewhat not destroyed, right? But it was already on the trajectory, but we didn't know. We didn't even know that Hillary Clinton may have been corrupt. Or we believed in her and all of this. And maybe she wasn't so bad. Maybe the reason why she was so slandered, and we need to ask these questions, Maybe there are things about her that are just total lies, but they are sold to us as truth. So I don't even know what to believe about Hillary Clinton anymore. I don't know what to believe from what I've all seen now. What is all happening? What's unfolding in politics, right? I mean, then when the criminals came in, the Biden criminals came into the government, the kind of damage they had created, it's just unspeakable. So the Good Samaritans, they have to clean all of this up now, and they're doing a very good job, and I'm so infinitely grateful for them, because if it wasn't for Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the other Good Samaritans, this country would be finished, okay? And we all know it, we all should know it, but okay, here comes the anosognosia with the people that have identified themselves with the Democratic Party. So it wouldn't matter what is happening to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party had been killed and had been made into a zombie, and these people will still cling to it like a baby monkey will cling to a dead mother. Okay. Horrific. Absolutely horrific. The baby monkey doesn't know better. The baby monkey is not in denial. The baby monkey is just in total despair. This is a real bad analogy, but that is kind of like what people are doing. They're clinging with hands and feet to a dead party that they have identified themselves. That's why Jiddu Krishnamurti said it is dangerous business when people identify themselves with a political party or religion or whatever, okay, or with being holy or being a Buddhist monk, you name it, anything. And Jiddu Krishnamurti was very, very, I would say, very Buddhist in a philosophical sense. He grew up Hindu in South India, was discovered by Annie Besant and rescued by her, by the Theosophical Society. Growing up with the Hindu and the Buddhism and just learning about religions across many, many, many different regions on Earth. But he was very much leaning towards Gautama Buddha, of course. He knew Gautama Buddha was legitimate and that he was a real philosopher with offering real insights and not just religious, it's real truth into existence. But he was very careful about this being made into a religion, of course, because every time someone makes something into a religion, it becomes rigid, and then people, they attach themselves to it, and they don't question it, and they identify themselves with it. So when there's an identification happening with the ego, then they don't question things. Then they take that as something written in concrete, and that is their go-to truth, and they don't ever question it, or they don't ever see the whole truth about the whole thing, because something can even be true in a specific phase within a specific time frame. But things in and around us change all the time. And at some point, that what they thought was actually legitimately true in that particular phase, maybe gets turned around or gets shifted. And we need to stay flexible and open-minded to notice these shifts and to understand that things have shifted, and that this, what pertained to the former situation or state of whatever it is, political, social, worldwide, health, earth, floods, oceans, whatever it is, moon tides, okay, that could also shift. What if it shifts? What if the Earth's magnetic field shifts suddenly? Okay? What if the poles get turned around or something? Then people have identified with themselves with the old situation, and now they are not willing to give up that what they thought was true, and maybe was legitimately true in the past, right? But it has shifted according to movement and churning and moving. The entire infinite cosmos is constantly moving and churning. Nothing is stagnant, okay? And we need to acknowledge that, and we need to embrace that, and we cannot stem ourselves against it in resistance, because that's what's happening. Esther Hicks always used that metaphor of a raging river. If you are in a boat, and she went into one of those river rafting boats, very dangerous. A friend of mine did that one time, and she fell overboard, and they barely got to rescue her. This is very dangerous. But she liked to use that metaphor because she experienced it. And she said that it's very dangerous, so you really gamble with your life. You go into a river rafting boat, because the river is not stopping. The river just follows its flow, okay, and sometimes very rapidly. And if you go into a resistance towards that river flow, and you cling to a rock, at some point you will lose energy, and the river will tear you off that rock, will tear you off your resistance, because you cannot deny something for an endless amount of time, because the situation itself will tear you down. Okay, so if people are in denial, like my mother was in denial about my brother taking drugs, and there was nothing I could do to warn her or to get her to understand. One time she was almost willing to believe it, but then she went into a fit, and she stomped her foot down in a video conversation, and she said, "Do I have two totally broken children?" Okay, so, and that lasted for 5 minutes, and after that she managed to deny it again, 100% hermetically sealed. Okay, the fact that my brother is taking drugs. No, he is. No, what makes you think that? So I told her what made me think that. That's when she had that fit, and whenever I had the better arguments, and that happened to go against one of her beliefs that she was clinging to, through identification again. Okay, I have a great son. Okay, my daughter is my sugar, but let me cling to the son. The son, or whatever, Hunter Biden, that the mother probably thought, my son is great. Let's ignore all the evidence against it. Okay, so my son is not broken. No, he's not broken. He is really fit, and, well, reality will tear her down at some point, okay? And reality in my mother's case got her murdered because he murdered her so that he can take charge of the situation with the inheritance, because she kept on telling me in the past, long time ago, she kept on telling me, I hope I don't die first. And I just couldn't understand why she would say this all the time. And I asked her, what makes you say this? And she didn't give me a conclusive answer. I was puzzled over this. What is that? It didn't make sense what she was because she couldn't tell me the full truth because of her identification again. Because if she told me, but then she was worried about me, see? And I didn't even know that she was. She was worried about me because she knew my brother might do something like this. My mother was also quite intuitive, and even though she was intuitive, she still managed to push all of this intuition down with a lid on a cooking pot, pressure cooker. So because it felt better to think that my brother is all reliable and great and reasonable and sane. It felt better. So she could be proud, and all of pride itself is already, pride is a pathology. The entire concept of pride, this mental state of pride is pathological. Okay, people need to, that's why the Hindus and Buddhists, they know better with this. They view pride as like a sin, like a deadly sin. To them, pride is a complete deviation from the natural state. And they knew all of this already for thousands of years. But the Westerners, it takes them a long time to finally figure all of that out, that they are right. Most people are just accepting that the Hindu and Buddhists without even thinking about it, right? But let's dive into this. I want to dive into the pathology of things. So I want to dive into the pathology of Peter Keller, because what is happening there with this man? What is going on? So the psychologist, he showed the first minutes. He just showed this Peter Keller rambling and out there in the forest in Washington State, where he was building himself an underground bunker. Peter Keller means cellar. Keller is a German word, means cellar. He was building his own Keller, his own cellar in the forest. Okay, it's also that is not a coincidence. That's a synchronicity. Okay, there's a lot of synchronicities all the time, particularly with names. Pay attention to that. You'll see unbelievable resemblance between names and their actual personalities or their professions even, and sometimes very ironic combinations of that. I pay attention to all of that. It's just sometimes I chuckle and snicker in my own head while I'm watching people's videos. I laugh about things that other people probably didn't even combine or pay attention to those synchronicities, but it's there all over the place. So for that, it's good to have Asperger's and to notice all of these types of associations. So it has plus and minus as everything. Okay, it's also scary sometimes, but it's also alerting me to things and Some people say you're paranoid. Yeah, that's very good. Okay, you cannot be paranoid enough, obviously. And in the case of Peter Keller, you will see why I say this. If you look up that case, I can't get into all the stuff right now, but that's why you're not giving people some homework to do after the video or in between the video. Pause the video, look up Peter Keller, Washington State. He had a YouTube channel, and he was insane. He was criminally insane, and no one called law enforcement. No one who watched these wannabe Bear Grylls videos, no one paid attention, or they either didn't see the danger of what was going on there, the insanity of this man, or they wanted to see something bad happen in these videos because he was planning the murder of his wife and daughter and dog. This totally insane man, okay? And no one called law enforcement. Or maybe someone did, but law enforcement, as usual, they're very slow, or they're not interested, or they're lazy, or they're on the side of the criminal. Okay, that happens a lot, and that's heartbreaking. That just makes me sad. What are these people even paid for? Okay, with our tax money. So we also, I said it many times in my videos, we need a complete psychiatry reform, and we need a complete detainment reform. Okay, so I talked to Paul earlier about this again. He saw some real crazy homeless people when he was walking baby dog, and he had to leave there early because of these crazy homeless people that were acting so crazy. He was scared. I mean, it happens all the time at the cemetery, particularly. There are some real insane homeless people. They think that's their park, okay, and then they do all kinds of weird stuff there. These people are also on bath salt and total and fentanyl and all of these totally brain frying drugs. They're on a cocktail of different things. Alcohol also, which completely destroys their brains. They can't function anymore. These people are 5150. They're dysfunctional to the core, and they are not only a nuisance, they are a danger to society. They're a danger to the community. They're a danger to animals and children. They need to be swept off the ground and put into an insane asylum. We need to have a closed facility, a closed psych ward for them. Just call it the sanatorium. Okay, the sanatorium is a closed compound that I just in my head drafted up basically over the years, and that is something that needs to happen. I don't know how to. Maybe I need to write a larger manifesto, and maybe I need to really put this into a concrete book of some sort. I already know, because I'm kind of discouraged with book writing, because I've already written a few books, and the only thing that happens with that is they immediately get shadow banned. Immediately, no matter where they are, whether they're on WordPress, Blogger, or on the Amazon bookstore for ebooks. It doesn't matter. I have a few there, and it's just completely, it's obscured. People don't even know that those books are there. So, and these books are never ever advertised anywhere or put into any kind, or shown in people's searches. I already know, and that deliberately so, and I'm not the only one. There's a whole lot of people that have their books shadow banned because the subject, and that happens through AI. They have developed AI that, or maybe some people that are working 24 hours for the corporate agenda also, some computer hackers and stuff. So there's a number of agents that are working for the corporate agenda that are constantly making sure that something that is of value for society, that empowers people or that makes people independent from the medical industry, from the pharma industry, though that those people get that their books and their information gets shadow banned, their channels get shadow banned and heaven banned. Okay, George Hotz did that on former, when it was called Twitter in the very beginning. After Elon Musk obtained Twitter, George Hotz came in order to Musk-proof Twitter. That's what he did. That's what the corporate agenda does. Okay, so I think it took a long time until people finally found out and were like, oh, the house is burning, Elon, pay attention what is going on there behind your back. And so George Hotz got fired, damage was done, and a whole lot of Good Samaritans accounts were shadow and heaven banned. I think George Hotz came up with this, the heaven banning, where the people are shadow banned and never even find out, because there are trolls and bots that will make them think that they are being seen when in fact they are not. So that's why Hotz called it heaven banning. I'm in heaven, I'm being seen, but it's just my illusion, right? So it's really nasty what's going on out there. It's incredible. So then Elon Musk and his team had an even harder time to fix all of those problems. That not only fix the problems that had already been done during the former Twitter era by the bad people, but now they had a real hard time fixing all of this and the damage that was done by George Hotz, who volunteered there to help fix Twitter, right? In order to make it actually worse. So that was his. He was paid by what? Bill Gates, millions of dollars to do that, right? So that's my suspicion, and I'm absolutely certain that is what happened. And it's disgusting, the kind of stuff that's going on out there, the criminality, and I'm trying to figure out what is going on with these people. Okay, what's going on with that Peter Keller? Why did he have to destroy his family if he wanted to live like a hermit in the woods? Okay, why destroy the family and the dog? It's an atrocity what he has done. Okay, the very people that were to his mercy, that were dependent on him, that loved him, that cared about him. His wife bragged him up in her videos. And then the contrast of what he was talking about and how he was talking about her and his life and how he felt cheated out of happiness, and that was all in his head. Okay. Apparently he was a computer expert and fixing people's computer problems. So he was making money, and yet he thought he was a failure, and he was very unwell, very, very bad. And when these things, when these pathologies, when they go unchecked, and no one says anything, no one says, what's wrong with you? You're full of shit. Your life is good. You should be grateful. You're making money. You have a successful profession. Things are going well. You have a beautiful wife and a beautiful daughter and a beautiful dog, and they love you. And when no one checks on this, when no one corrects him with his self-whining and complaining, then it escalates further and further and further into it, just like with the incel community, for example. It just, and they will then reinforce each other, and then it snowballs, because it snowballs into a massive amount of people that will all tell the same story about themselves, and cry together, whine together. Okay. They're not even crying, they're just whining. If they would be crying all of this out, then they could start healing. But that would require know thyself. That would require an introspection into the bullshit that they're doing, actually. People need to be stopped with reason. People need to be told what you're doing there is pathological. What you're doing there is very self-destructive. Your narratives are self-destructive, and that can escalate, and they need to be warned about this. I have to do this with Paul all the time. I have to remind Paul that what he's doing here again is not beneficial for him and for us here in this life together. I have to constantly remind him. Sometimes I cry because of this, because he's escalating into something. I have to systematically stop him and tell him and give him reality, and show him reality, show him a mirror what he's doing, and then the brain registers. Yeah, okay. No, he doesn't say, oh yeah, but inside of the head. Yeah. He's not like really insightful and admits stuff to me, because the ego doesn't want to admit something. Maybe deep down, but not to me, right? So that takes another level of truth and honesty to admit that to someone else. But at least he stops doing what he's doing with the act out, and is being put in his place in that moment. And that is absolutely necessary. If I didn't do this, it would escalate into something unbearable, where I could not live here anymore. Okay, I couldn't. That wife of Peter Keller never ever said anything, never stopped him, probably didn't even see what he was doing, the weirdness and him being gone all day long. Never. That reminds me of my mother, with my dad having a double life. Never ever asking a question, never saying that hurt my feelings when you weren't there, when I had to take care of Nikki and my mother after I was born. He just ducked away. He just ducked into a double life and partying, and completely abandoned her, let her deal with the newborn. Not only that, while she was also taking care of her mother, who was very sick. Her mother was about to die. Her mother had cancer, and awful, I hate that word. But it is what it is. She had to take care of her mother and the newborn baby. That was very traumatic also for me, of course, to come into this situation. It takes a village to take care of a newborn baby. It really does, okay? if a mother doesn't even have help, and then my mother is too proud to ask for help. That's another thing. That's another identification again. I don't need help. I am tough, she would always say. I can do it. No, you can't, okay? And nobody can, okay? It's very, very difficult. A baby can keep you awake. You need to sleep, okay? You have to have many people that take care of that baby. People have to take turns. But for that, we have to trust the other people, of course. For my mother, it wasn't a lack of trust. She trusted everyone. For my mother, it was this pride and identification of being tough and being so super fit that she would need help from anyone. She would always say, I am so normal, and you and Annalise are so my sugar. Annalise was my child therapist. Annalise and I, we were the ones that were actually paying attention to it. We were the ones that were doing the know thyself, okay, which my mother interpreted as meshuggah, because that was like a no-go zone for her. So to look at herself, no. Should I do therapy now at age 70, she said to me. I should have said, damn yes, hell yes. Absolutely dang yes. Okay, that's what I should have said to her. She stamped her foot on the ground. I should have stamped my foot on the ground. And I should have said, hell yes. I am forcing you with gunpoint to go with me to Geneva. Because you, my dear mommy, Marlies, okay, you need it more than Annalise and I do. You need it the worst. And that is a fact. But I didn't, because I chickened out. That's how she managed to make me feel guilty for even saying that. I felt like I just said something real bad. Oh man, that's a terrible thing what I just did, to ask her to go to therapy with me. And today I wouldn't be intimidated by this anymore, but back then I was young and intimidated. So, yeah, not good. Not good to ever be intimidated by anyone. It wouldn't matter who it is, your mother or your father or anyone. And I wasn't intimidated by my brother, but my dad was intimidated by my brother. My brother systematically intimidated my poor old dad. And that's why my mother said, I hope I don't die before Peter. My dad's name was Peter also. What another terrible synchronicity. So, and now I understand why, okay, because she knew that this was a situation that could happen and was very likely to happen, and it did happen. But then when I pointed out all of these things, she didn't want to hear about it. How bizarre is all of this? How bizarre is the human brain, actually. But interesting, all of this, and I think about it all the time. And the wife of Peter Keller was in complete denial. Like anosognosia type. I saw her video, I saw some video clips, I saw it right away. I saw right away that here's a girl that is in complete denial. And also the way she worded her, my wonderful husband, and he is so good to us. And when I hear something like this, I'm already like, this is a red flag. I mean, it's like, no one is wonderful and perfect. We all have our issues, and we have our idiosyncrasies and our problems and our ego issues, and we need to be put in our place. We need to be reminded what you're doing there is BS. Every one of us needs to be reminded. Some people call it tough love. No, I call it love. It's not tough. It is love. When I care about someone, I say, hey, you are not taking showers. I had to say that to a friend of mine in LA. I said, you're not taking showers. You're starting to smell. Okay, your body odor. And she felt so ashamed about this. And I felt sorry that I had to say this. But I said, but I care about you. That's why I say that to you. And she said she falls into this state of self-neglect when she is... That wasn't primotherapy, and the other people there, they weren't paying attention to those things. Most of these people, they were not paying enough attention. Arjanov was paying more attention. That was the time after Arjanov had retired, and people weren't paying attention to stuff. And I was busy with my own problems, but I paid a lot more attention. That probably has to do with my Asperger's. But that's why I'm saying it's not a disability. It's actually an advantage. You see more in your vision field. You see what other people are doing. Even when you're busy with your own issues and your own life and your own worries, you see what other people are doing around you. I smell, when friends start smelling and they don't wash their hair or their clothes, I have to say something. This is important, okay? And that's at least what I'm talking about. I mean, we have to see when other people are escalating themselves into something very bad, like that Peter Keller did. People need to say something. The daughter didn't say anything either. She may have been intimidated by it. The dog was the one that warned his wife and his daughter. The dog was the one, whenever he came home, the dog growled at him and barked viciously at him when he was even approaching the house. That should have been a wake-up call for them. At least that should have been a wake-up call. The psychologist took note of that as well, because he is very alert and very, very, very paying very close attention to the details of all of this. It's very refreshing to see that, to see someone paying very close attention to all of these nitty-gritty details. The devil is in the details. There's also a lot of shame in the details, but it needs to come to the surface. It is absolutely infinitely important. So what is the pathology behind Peter Keller? Why did he do it? I think he did that, and this is not an excuse, okay? That guy, if they caught him alive, he should get euthanized. So I'm glad he shot himself in the head. I'm very glad. It's good that he did. Okay. Because that guy was very far gone, and he was a danger to the community, and he would also be a danger to the sanatorium. If we put him into a sanatorium, he would be a danger to the other people there, whether that's other inmates or the staff. He would be. And there are people like him that need to be euthanized because they are a danger to the staff or the other inmates. Okay. Whatever institution they're in, whether that's a prison or it's a reformed detention center. We need a complete reform. We need to do it better. The president of El Salvador is doing it better. Okay, so he has the better prison approach. much, much better. So it's not exactly identical with my detainment reform proposal, but I am milder on the people with my reform proposal, but I am on board with what he's doing, because that is a step in the right direction. Absolutely. So what I'm saying about Peter Keller now is not an excuse to get Peter Keller in any way off the hook, neither judicially nor ethically, okay, nor psychologically. So there's no excuse for any of these things. There are plenty of other people that had it much rougher, and they still don't do it. Okay, so then we can dive into what makes this person do this then while the other person doesn't do it. So I get into this all the time, and there are three fields that are important to dive into it. As I always say, early childhood, or childhood in general, this lifetime, then past lifetimes, which is karmic pain, and also biological, that is inherited trauma from our ancestors, that is inherited and carried through with our DNA. Okay, all 3 points, all 3 fields need to be explored by science. Science is just barely beginning to touch into these fields, but it is beginning very gradually, and I'm very glad about this. So what other people call completely batshit crazy is actually true. It's actually reality, and we need to look into it, and we need to not be worried about what other people think of us, because that will just hinder any kind of scientific development and fast movement forward. So we want to move forward, particularly when it comes to suffering beings and animals at risk, children at risk. That the entire human trafficking industry is so way out of control. All of this, what I'm talking about, ties into this and is vitally important to explore in order to get a grip of a global pandemic of psychological pathology, with human trafficking of all kinds of forms that go all the way into evil, demonic, disgusting, incredibly horrific things. Okay, I've seen it all, heard it all. Long time ago, I thought this must be a conspiracy theory. Now I know all of this is actually, these things are actually happening, and it is heartbreaking beyond measure. Okay, and that's why these things need to be discussed, they need to be addressed. We need to have a real serious crackdown on human traffickers and on the drug cartels. All of this needs to be, and they're going for it. The good Samaritans are going for it, and I am infinitely grateful to all of you, okay, to take this on as bravely as you do, against all odds, against all the pushback, against all this, the democratic evilness movements and so on. You are brave soldiers. You are brave warriors to take this on. You are, I don't want to say soldiers, because I'm against war, but I'll call them warriors, the warriors of love. Paul did that thing with the hearing aids, and he has hearing aids and the over volume off and on, and I absolutely don't like it because of my Asperger's. I'm really highly sensitive to these terrible sounds. The computer probably didn't even pick up that terribly shrill sound. So, but anyway, so I'm not making any excuses for Peter Keller, but I think what happened with him, the reason why he took his family with him into the abyss, is because, as that psychiatrist, he called there was another murder case, he called that guy a blob. That Peter Keller is a blob of epic proportions. So that is another blob, that Peter Keller. That is another one of those, and there's a lot of those blobs, that from the he uses this analogy of that horror movie, The Blob, where it's a long time ago they made a horror movie of this, like an outerworldly type of ball that swallows everything up in its environment. And the psychological blobs are those psychopaths that think once they have someone in their life, they can't let go of it anymore. So, and then those are the ones that will, if the wife wants to divorce them, those are the ones that will then kill the wife. And usually they already have plan B with life insurance in place, just in case she says at some point she wants to get a divorce. Then he'll have that life insurance, because he'll do away with her and cash in on the life. That's why the life insurance, that's another evil thing that needs to be completely outlawed, okay? Because it gives people the incentive of murdering someone. It's all there is to it. Let's be very blunt about it. That's the reality, isn't it? So, that happened with that other case, of course. And there are so many cases I can't count it anymore. I've watched so many 48-hour crime reports and other crime reports where this is a common theme. It's always the man killing his wife and cashing in on life insurance. Yeah, this is so common happening that it's almost becoming the norm. And be careful, people will call it normal. That can happen very quickly, right? So just because something is becoming the norm, still don't call it normal. Or even if you call it normal, it is a very pathological normal. It is the opposite of ideal, and it needs to be inspected, investigated, and abolished. Okay, so that's why this is so incredibly important, that we introspect and that we also pay close attention to what other people are doing around us. And when we know for sure in our hearts and minds that the other person is doing something wrong there, and this is escalating, we have to say something. We have to speak out. We have to remind that other person that what he or she is doing is not going in the right direction. This is our duty to do that, as a family member or friend or whatever, okay? Or just as a resident living on Earth in any kind of country or region. Okay. It is our duty to say when something is going wrong with another person, or with a politician, or with a political party, or with an entire nation, or worldwide. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. There's things going wrong worldwide, and we need to pay attention to this if we want to make it better, if we want to fix this. Okay, it's very important. But what I think with Peter Keller is that he hated himself, and he condemned himself. It's also very, very bad escalation. He needed help, right? Long ago he needed help, and he didn't get the help. That's why we need to have a psychiatric reform. We need group therapy that is there for all people at all times, every single day, from 5 to 8. We need group therapy, and in the sanatoriums, which are closed, there it should be mandatory. They need to be forced to attend, because this is absolutely vitally important for them. So, but if we had group therapy offered in a community center, in every community center worldwide from 5 to 8, there would not be teenagers committing suicide anymore. Okay? That's my guarantee. Or the suicide rate would go way, way, way down. We can help millions, even billions of teenagers. We can help them psychologically, empower them, give them a space where they can cry it out, where they are heard and seen. Okay? Very important. Well, that Peter Keller has never been seen by anyone. His wife and daughter, they can't see him either, because they are too much in their own bubble and in their own anosognosia, of course. That's why a lot of men, they like to be kind of like, what they call it, wife whipped or something. But they want to be put in their place by their partners. They don't want to have a partner that worships them and never says anything, for a reason, because they're probably not even consciously aware about it, because deep down they know they need to be put in their place. And then that becomes psychological, that becomes another, can even become a sexual fetish and all of this, where they need to seek a dominating woman or something like this, and then takes it out of context and sexualizes it and pathologizes that again too. But bring it back to ground zero, okay, base camp. Why are they getting bored with someone that worships them? Because these people don't even see them. Okay? They don't even, that's really not love. Okay? When someone worships you, that's not love, and you know it, you feel it. And then whatever you're doing, it escalates, because they will never stop you. They will never say anything. They will never remind you that what you're doing is not going anywhere. You're hurting yourself and others. So, men and women, we want a partner who is strong-minded, who pays attention, who sees us, who sees our BS also, even if it hurts the ego. We want the other person to catch us while we're falling. I catch you with your total act out. And I remind you, don't keep falling on this trajectory. And that is love. Okay. That's why, when I said to Carla, to my friend, when I said to my friend, you have to be careful with your hygiene. You need to take showers. You need to take care of yourself. It hurts the ego, but that's love, okay? To see the other with what they're doing. That's love. And that can also make someone walk away, but you have to take that risk, at least. If they are determined on a bad path of their lives, then there's nothing you can do. You can't stop an adult, right? But you can at least, when you love them, when you care about them, you can at least tell them, you are on the wrong path here. You're on the path of self-destruction, or you're on the path of hurting others, or hurting me in this, okay? You're making me cry every day, or whatever. Don't continue this. You have to say that to help them. Because that is love. That's also self-love. That's love for others. It's love for all, for the whole world, for all beings. You have to say something. You have to be a political activist. You have to stand up for truth, for justice, for real justice. Okay? When you see fake activists doing violent things, then you have to stand up for justice, for the safety of others. Okay? When you see that a good Samaritan is being slandered, then you have to say something on the internet and say this is wrong. Okay? It's wrong what they're doing to Elon Musk. It's wrong what they're doing to Donald Trump. These haters and that are paid by Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos or whoever, Klaus Schwab, the string holders. Okay? We need to say something about this and not jump on some kind of peer pressure bandwagon. Okay? If you jump on a peer pressure bandwagon, you are denying, you are going against your own body. You're denying your own health and your own happiness if you do that. That's very, very tragic. So that Peter Keller was a massive blob, and he didn't like him. He didn't feel seen by them, obviously. But he couldn't even say that to them. Because I think it's also completely unconscious. So he really was looking for something, for someone who would see him, I guess. But he wasn't even aware. That's why know thyself is so important. It was completely unconscious. But he just knew he wasn't happy. He was suffering with them, with his wife, and the daughter, of course, is young and in her own things. But his wife worshipping him, that's not a good situation. Okay. And I'm not blaming her. I'm not blaming any victim. I'm just pointing out the situation. And I'm not letting the perpetrator get off the hook. Just explaining this the way I see it and understand it. Okay. And how we must prevent this from happening with other families. Okay. That's why I talk about these things. And then he couldn't just walk away then and live in the woods, because his ego cannot tolerate the idea that if he leaves them, that his wife can find another man who will then become the new dad of his daughter and the new wife of the new husband of his wife. Okay. So the ego cannot, my brain always makes things up. The ego cannot tolerate this idea. That's what the blob is. The ego cannot tolerate that they will move on and find someone else. And then they are no longer in his blob, so to speak. So they're then independent and outside of his blob. They're like his food of his blob, right? They're like some people will say, I like you so much you can put me into your shirt pocket. Or what? That's a very dangerous, very, very dangerous phrase, a very dangerous metaphor. So don't ever use that metaphor. It's almost like you're giving yourself away. That should never happen. Okay? And this gives into blobs, a statement like that. No one can ever put me in their shirt pocket. I would never fit into any shirt pocket or into any potato sack. Okay, so I'm way, way, way too big for that. And that is good. I like being big. So also mentally, of course, so psychologically. I have to stand on my own, psychologically. I'm not financially, I'm dependent on Paul, which is not a good situation, also psychologically not good. But at least, I contribute a lot to our lives. A lot. We both contribute to our lives. It's a give and take, we're both contributors to this life that we're constantly trying to improve and make better. And we're both investors now. Okay, we're in this together now. Okay, and this is very good. And sometimes we may be in some way at the mercy to someone or be dependent on the whole society. We have to become very clear. The whole society is an interdependent thing. Okay, no one is completely independent from anything. Okay? We're all interdependent. We all depend on the Chinese doing it better than we do, for creating goods that we can all afford. Okay, so it's a network of interdependency, of course, and politicians need to acknowledge that. Elon Musk and Donald Trump are acknowledging that. Okay, that's why they want peace and they want to have a very good connection and trade connection and so on, because they are very, very aware of that situation, and that the same applies to individual friendships and acquaintanceships and so on, or just professional connections and so on. This is very, very important that we all have a functioning and peaceful and meaningful connection to other people in whatever way. Okay? It's very, very important that it is mutually beneficial for all, that something that feels good is good for you, is good for others, and serves the greater good, as Tony Robbins said. It's very, very important that we have that going. So, in a case of pathology like Peter Keller, he was completely unconscious about all of this, and he was probably also very unconscious about being a blob and being a narcissist and a psychopath and needing and having I have a husband, or in Peter Keller's case, I have this wife, I have it, she's in my blob. I have a daughter, she's in my blob. Okay, so that is what the psychological blob is. Okay, they're his, and he can't stand the idea of committing suicide, and then they move on and find another husband and father. Okay, where is he then? He's annihilated then. Okay, people always think like this in terms of also post-mortem. This is really, really bad. It's awful. Instead of making everything happen and good for the others before they oust themselves. That's what I would do. I would do anything I can do to make it good for the ones I leave behind, to make it safe for them. Okay, that's my number one priority, and that should be the number one priority for everyone. But when someone is pathological like Peter Keller, they've never grown up. Okay, so they're still like a toddler psychologically. They're still like a 1-year-old. Okay, it's mommy for me and me the baby blob, and for a toddler that is appropriate and necessary. But he's 40 years old, and now he views everyone in his life as in his blob, and he can't oust himself without ousting them too, taking them with him as the blob that he is. And that's my explanation for it, and it's not an excuse at all. It's just a psychological explanation, because I'm trying to understand people. And I think that is what's going on. That's what was going on with him. And it is an utmost infinite tragedy. And I sent them all love. Okay, they are in space now, and they can look back on the situation, and they can laugh and cry at the same time, and they know now how things tie in. Okay? It takes that perspective, the sky perspective, literally. So, but that's their soul school. We are going through life as a student, and we're learning, and for many people, even the death experience, that's Jiddu Krishna, what David Bohm, what we're talking about, can that be an experience? Yeah, it is an experience, obviously, for the soul. So, life and death is an experience for the soul. It is our school, okay, and the souls apparently choose this level of difficulty and hardship in order to learn, and it's very tragic, and I will still interfere the hell out of everything, because that's my right as my soul that I am, to interfere and intercept and save everyone I can save. Okay, so anyway, peace and love, take care.